A lot going on in the world of mixed martial arts. This past weekend, this past week, no shortage of topics to discuss today, and there were a ton of events this past weekend. We had LFA, Legacy Fighting Alliance, we had ACB doing great things, and then of course the UFC on Saturday night in Fortaleza. By now you probably know that Kelvin Gastelum defeated Vitor Belfort in the first round, and Vitor essentially said this is his second to last fight. This was after the loss. Went on the mic and said, I have one fight left on my contract and I want to play it out come June 3rd in Rio de Janeiro. That's the UFC pay-per-view headlined by Max Holloway and Jose Aldo. Is that a little too soon? Does that make sense? He's also talking about a Legends division, wanting to start that up with some crazy rules. So we'll talk about his loss, his future, but more importantly, Kelvin Gastelum, who I thought looked fantastic once again at 185. Now his second in a row at 185. Looked great in his return just a few months ago in Toronto and looks quicker, is on point. His striking is really coming along. Massive props to Rafael Cordero. And he continues to talk about 170. I don't understand why. He's eating, he's healthy. Kelvin Gastelum is the model citizen that they should push forth in terms of trying to deter fighters from cutting drastic amounts of weight. He is the perfect example as to why you should not kill your body on the way to the fight, on the way to the scale. Look at him. He's comfortable, he's happy, he's healthy, and he's doing very well, and he's beating pretty solid competition. Yes, these are older fighters, but you know, he's outworking a game Tim Kennedy. He's finishing Vitor Belfort, totally outclassing Vitor Belfort. Why do you want to go down to 170? I don't get it. At least for now, thankfully, his handlers are stopping him from doing so. So that was an impressive win. Shogun Rua defeated John Vellante, and quietly, Shogun Rua has his third win in a row, tied for the longest, in like a decade or something like that. Best for him in the UFC. Shogun Rua, very, very slowly but surely, is now on a winning streak. Who would have thought after OSP knocked him out in a matter of seconds? Remember that? The whole gif with the skateboard? We thought he was done at that point. I thought he was done after the Dan Henderson fight, the rematch. And now all of a sudden he's won 3 in a row. It's nice to see, good for him, all that stuff and more. But I don't want to see him fight the upper echelon of 205. Not at all. Keep him away from the upper echelon. And I know that is a very, very exclusive club. There aren't that many upper tier light heavyweights right now. That being said, let's not book him against any of those. I saw some people calling for maybe winner of Glover versus Gustafsson. I don't want anything to do with that. Give him fights like this. That was in the co-main event. We'll talk more about the card in a second. Let me run down today's lineup, and then we'll have some thoughts on the weekend that was, and then get into our first guest of the day. Okay, stack show as always. New York Rick is not here. This is amazing because New York Rick is not here. So I said to myself, okay, I won't have someone ho-humming in the back, wanting more airtime, demanding more airtime in that sort of passive-aggressive way that he likes to, he's like, oh, I'm all about the show. I don't want more airtime. But I know in his mind, the more guests I have, he recognizes, okay, there's going to be less airtime for me. Well, this time around, he's on his honeymoon in England, and I don't know if any of you follow him on social media, but all he's tweeting about are the telephones over there. I mean, could you not be more of a tourist, New York Rick? It's all about telephones. Is there anything else that you're seeing of interest over there in England? Apparently not. It's just a bunch of telephones. Could we get one more picture of a telephone? Maybe, if we're lucky. So he's out this week, and we've got Adam in the back. And the great thing about New York Rick being gone this week is that he goes on a honeymoon like once every 8 months or so. And we miss him. I'm not going to lie, we miss him. But then when he's gone, we're reminded of the fact that he takes 4 hours to actually, do his prep work when it takes Adam, and I'm assuming any other, relatively smart individual, 30 minutes. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, maybe an hour tops. But wow, when he comes back, we got to kick it into gear, Mr. New York Rick. I don't mean to pile it on. I definitely miss seeing him around. I miss his insight, but it is eye-opening, to say the least. I hope he's having fun. Speaking of the UK. Thank you very much to Robert Whiteford for this amazing stuffed friend. My son Oliver likes to call these things stuffed friends, not stuffed animals like I used to. So, and I think that that's apropos since they're not always animals. Robert Whiteford, who was victorious this past weekend at ACB, he submitted Nam Phan in a matter of seconds, and then afterwards Nam Phan went online and kind of retired, but not really, which was a theme this weekend because Josh Berkman did the same. Anyway, big win for Robert Whiteford, our friend from Scotland, who sent me a haggis stuffed friend. You see it right there, wearing the traditional Scottish cap. How about that? That might be the greatest addition to this set. A stuffed friend haggis. Look at that. How cute is that? I love it. If you're listening to this on iTunes, it's a haggis. It's wearing one of those Scottish caps, you know, the one with the plaid and all that, the red and the black, eyes, smiley face. It's just so darn cute. I want to take it home and give it to my kids, but I like it on the set. So thank you very much to Mr. Robert Whiteford. Like I said, we're stacked this week. No time to waste because we've got a lot of guests to talk to. We got 9 in total. At 125, we're going to be joined by Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson. He is fighting Wilson Reis April 15th, UFC on Fox in Kansas City. He's looking to tie Anderson Silva's record, 10 in a row, as far as title defenses are concerned for Demetrious Johnson. So he ties Anderson's record with a win on April 15th, live and free on Fox. That's the main event. As you may have heard last week, they also added Jacare versus Robert Whittaker to that card, along with Michelle Watterson and Rose Namajunas. Very good card. Very solid Fox card. 145, we're going to be joined by Yoel Romero. I've been wanting to talk to Yoel Romero ever since the news came out around 2 weeks ago that GSP was going to cut the line and fight Michael Bisping. What does he think about it all? What does it mean when the UFC says that they're going to quote unquote take care of him? What's he planning on doing? Is he going to sit out? If GSP fights Bisping in September, as he told us he's planning on doing on this show last week, what is Romero going to do? That means he might be out for, well over a year. Because remember, he last fought in November at the MSG show. So what does Yoel Romero think about all of this? And of course, we hope that he'll be joined by my favorite translator in the business, Ray, who, those two guys, they're like peanut butter and jelly at this point. You can't do a Yoel Romero interview without Ray. He's unbelievable. The facial expressions, the demeanor, the delivery, the accent, it all just works. It's perfect. The look. So that's at 145. At 205, we're going to talk to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the UFC strawweight champion. She returns to action on May 13th, UFC 211 against Jessica Andrade. This is a fascinating fight on a fascinating card. Last week, UFC 211 just continued to get more and more interesting. Yes, it lost the Ben Rothwell versus Fabricio Verdum fight. Ben Rothwell, provisionally suspended by USADA, says that it was for a medical reason, and we hope that everyone is not, accusing him of being guilty before he is, before he has his day in court, so to speak, before he actually goes out there and defends himself. And this once again brings up the issue of announcing these things before the fighters are able to actually provide the proper paperwork and defend themselves, etc. But that's a different discussion for a different day. That fight is off. Verdum is off the card, but that card is just absolutely amazing. I don't know what the fans in Dallas did to deserve such a great card, but good for them. It's got 2 title fights. It's got the Stipe Miocic versus Junior Dos Santos rematch. It's got Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Jessica Andrade, which is just a great strawweight fight. Andrade, without a doubt, the number 1 contender at 115. It's got Damian Maia versus Masvidal. It's got Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier. That was announced last week. It's got Henry Cejudo versus Sergio Pettis. It's got Frankie Edgar versus Yair Rodriguez, also announced last week. James Vick versus Marco Polo Reyes. Vic wanted to fight on that card. He told us on this show. Chaz Skelly versus Jason Knight. I reported last week that David Branch will be returning to the UFC on that card against Krzysztof Jotko. That is a great card. That is a fantastic card. And the only kind of head-scratching thing about the whole card is it makes it even more confusing as to why Maia and Masvidal is even being booked. I can understand if you needed that fight for a main event. I can understand if you needed it, for a prime spot, but this is going to be like the 3rd or 4th fight on the card. I'm assuming it's going to be on the pay-per-view, but why did you need it so badly? Why did you need to hold up the division when you had a guy who won in August? It actually makes it more of a head-scratcher to me. This card doesn't necessarily need, no one's going to buy this pay-per-view because of Maia Masvidal. It is a fantastic card. It is a fantastic fight. This is just making the rich richer. It's like like a third cherry on top. You didn't really need it. I get it if you needed it for Nashville, which was the original report. You can make the case that needs a main event. This one doesn't need a fourth great fight. It's got a ton of fourth great fights. Anyway, so we'll talk to Ioana Jędrzejczyk as I go on that tangent at 2:05. At 2:25, we're going to talk to Brad Pickett. Brad Pickett is in action this weekend in London, and I know this is a much maligned card, but I will say, look at the actual card. Other than the main event, it's actually really good. I know fans were disappointed. I know that they, waited till you bought all the tickets and then announced a main event, which was already on the card. They just bumped it up to the main event. But this is a really, really fun card. I would say that top to bottom, it's better than the Bisping Silva card. Top to bottom. Main event doesn't compare, of course. But top to bottom, it's actually really good. So Brad Pickett is fighting in his retirement fight. Again, it was supposed to be against Henry Briones Bure, nicknamed after the great Pavel Bure. But for the third time, that fight has been canceled. And now he's fighting Marlon Vera on a little over a week's notice. Brad Pickett, hanging up the gloves on Saturday. He was part of that retirement fight for Uriah Faber this past December. Now he gets a chance to say goodbye on his own terms in front of his hometown crowd. I love it. So he'll be joining us at 2:25. Also on that card, Makwan Amirkhani is fighting Arnold Allen in a fantastic fight. We have not heard from Makwan in quite some time. Hasn't fought in a little over a year. Where's he been? I know he was at SBG for a little bit, but I always like talking to Mr. Finland, and he'll be joining us at 2:45. Of course, the other big fight on that card is Gunnar Nelson versus Alan Jouban. The main event is Jimmy Manuwa versus Corey Anderson. I also love the Joe Duffy fight against Reza Madadi. This is the last fight on Joe Duffy's current UFC contract. If he wins this fight, you'd think he's going to cash in. The Bellator organization is doing a lot of events these days in Ireland, Northern Ireland. You'd think they'd be interested in him as well if he finishes up the contract on a win. So that's a intriguing one, and it's happening on Fight Pass this Saturday. Mark Diakese. It's a really, really good card. I really like it a lot. I mean, of course, it has that European slant, the English slant, but I like the matchups. As I did this past Saturday, the Fight Night card was fun as well. So that's at 2:45. Makwan Amirkhani. Tony Ferguson will stop by at 3:05. Yes, we talked to him last week, but there's a little more to talk to him about. And so I wanted to talk to him about the week that was. He came out and said that he got less than half of his show money, which, by the way, go back to the press conference. When Dana White was asked if Tony Ferguson would get his show money, a lot of people listened to what he said and for some reason kind of just assumed that he said that he was going to get his show money, that Dana confirmed this. He didn't really confirm it. He kind of non-answered the question. Ferguson very vocal about this. And yes, it does say, or I should say it doesn't say in the bout agreement or the contract that they are required to pay the show money if you weigh in and your opponent doesn't make it to the scale or make it to the fight. Nowhere does it say that. And that's, quite frankly, on the managers. I believe it was Jeff Wagenheim on the beat last week that said the managers need to put that in the contract. You can't necessarily cry foul, even though there has been a precedent set when it doesn't say it in black and white. You got to get that in there. So we'll talk to Ferguson about that. We'll talk to him about where he goes from here. I was told that the UFC attempted to make Ferguson versus Khabib April 8th in Buffalo, UFC 210, but too soon for Khabib, and that's understandable. I also was told that there was an attempt to see if it was possible to make Ferguson versus Eddie Alvarez before they locked in Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier for UFC 211, but that's not happening as well. Short notice for Eddie Alvarez, I could certainly understand that. There's only two fights that I think make sense for Ferguson at this time, Khabib or Nate Diaz. And if Khabib is going to take an extended period of time off, if he cannot fight before Ramadan, I kind of feel like they need to make that fight for the July 8th card in Las Vegas. Ferguson versus Nate Diaz, that is. 3:30, we'll be joined by Michael Chiesa. He was brought up last week sort of by Eddie Alvarez when Eddie Alvarez called him the tough guy. From what I understand, it came down to Michael Chiesa and Dustin Poirier for Eddie. They went with Eddie versus Dustin Poirier. Want to talk to Michael Chiesa, who we have not seen in action since April of last year in Tampa, was booked to fight Tony Ferguson. Remember, he got injured, hurt his back, and then Lando Venata stepped in, and he's kind of become the forgotten man at 155. So we'll talk to him at 330. 350, we'll talk to Misha Cirkunov. And Misha Cirkunov is back in the UFC, has gone 4-0. Remember, he had that contract issue, and it seemed like his days were numbered as far as the UFC is concerned. And then all of a sudden, he's back. And not only is he back, but he has his next fight yet. He has his next fight. His next fight is going to take place May 28th in Stockholm, that fight night event headlined by Glover Teixeira versus Alexander Gustafsson. Volkan Ozdemir of Switzerland, who beat OSP back in early February in Houston. This was first reported by Aaron Bronstetter of TSN. So good timing. We'll have Misha Cirkunov on the show at 350. 410, we'll talk to Rashad Evans about his debut at 185 and where he goes from here after losing to Daniel Kelly. Rashad's name kind of came up after the Kelvin Gastelum win over Vitor Belfort, because Vitor said he wants one last fight June 3rd in Rio. And some people said, okay, why not Rashad? He's coming off a loss, kind of at the same stage, although Vitor's a little bit older. And then there's that whole Black Zillions angle. They sort of, trained with each other briefly when Vitor was in Florida. That's definitely a possibility. The possibility, and Anderson's name came up for Kelvin, although I don't know how much I love that fight for Kelvin. Maybe, it's a big fight for him in Rio. Vitor was asked about it. Vitor versus Anderson too, which I think makes a hell of a lot of sense. That's a really big fight for Rio. That's the fight back at UFC 126, which propelled Anderson into the stratosphere that he's now in at least Brazilian MMA circles and Brazilian pop culture circles. But Vitor said he doesn't want to go out against a Brazilian. So do we go back to Rashad? And then what do you do with Gastelum? Gastelum brought up something very interesting in the post-fight press conference about the rankings. I mean, it's become, kind of commonplace to crap all over the rankings, but it is a tough spot for the fighters who are in that division, 185, even 155. Like you hear a guy like Edson Barbosa. Edson Barbosa had a phenomenal finish against Beneil Dariush. Your heart goes out to Dariush. He looked really good. He won the first round. He was arguably en route to winning the second round, and then he gets brutally knocked out via flying knee. And then afterwards, Barbosa says, I want a title shot. Well, the queue now is so long that, what are these guys shooting for? Are they just shooting, for paychecks? That's not bad. You have to make a living. But Gastelum, Barbosa are kind of in the same boat in that regard. So where does Gastelum go from here? I suggested the winner of Weidman Mousasi. Is that a little too soon? Perhaps, but you could say, okay, let's give him a slow build. You go from Kennedy, you go to Belfort, maybe Weidman Mousasi is a bit of a jump. But when you consider the fact that Romero is only going to fight for the belt, in, 10 months, 11 months, you have to keep him active some way, somehow. So do you want to give him a lesser opponent to let him go on, maybe get 2-3 fights in? Or do you want to really see where he's at against the winner of Weidman Mousasi, which is taking place, of course, in less than a month in Buffalo? I do not want to see him, though, go down to 170. One thing that came up, by the way, this past Saturday, last weekend, a lot of promos for UFC 210. I noted that I thought that they were very favorable towards Rumble Johnson. Look at the promos. Look at every single one. Look at the talking points. It's all like UFC light heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier is fighting the killer of all killers, the most feared man in the world, the scariest puncher, the scariest knockout artist in the history. It's all building up Rumble Johnson. And I don't think for one second that the UFC doesn't like Daniel Cormier. I actually think that they like him a lot. They've given him a ton of TV time. He's now, a color analyst. He's got the Fox gig. This is not a slight on Cormier. I just think that they don't know how to build up these fights. They're using the same stock sound bites for every commercial. It's all the yelling and screaming, and even, they're using like Wonder Boy's voice in this promo, and You got Goldberg still in there. I mean, you parted ways with the guy. I don't think you should be using him anymore. We don't need the same formulaic commercials. And this kind of, was brought to light last week with the posters. Someone reached out to me. I'll leave their name out of it. I won't tell you what department, what their history is. Someone reached out to me who is very knowledgeable as far as the whole marketing department is concerned at the UFC, and kind of gave me the rundown about what's going on. And it's what we sort of figured. Just a lot of layoffs. They're working with a skeleton crew, 43 events. They don't have time to give each event TLC, and I get that. Your typical fight night doesn't need, TLC, so to speak, but your 12 to 13 pay-per-views, I think, need a little boosting. They need a special poster. They don't need a poster that looks like it was cobbled together on, 20 minutes notice. They need a special promo with some originality, some imagination. These promos with the yelling and just building. How about building up the fact that Daniel Cormier is an All-American? How about building up the fact that he's, an Olympian? How about building up the fact that he is arguably the pound-for-pound king in the sport? I mean, this guy lost once in his career at light heavyweight to arguably the greatest fighter of all time. Let's not forget how good John Jones was before he hit this rough patch. And he was undefeated at heavyweight. And the only reason why he really went down to 205 was because his friend, Cain Velasquez, was in the mix, in the title picture mix over there. And then he goes down to 205 and he loses once to the champ. And then he comes back after the champ is out and beats Rumble Johnson and beats Alexander Gustafsson. It's not his fault that Jones backed out back in July. And I know people like to bring up the fact that he hasn't defended the title all that much. Yes, he's been injury hit. There's no doubt about it. He has pulled out of some fights, especially as of late. No doubt about it. But that doesn't take away what he's done. And you can't build this guy up. You can't tell us about, you're showing us Patrick Cummins highlights. Come on, he's done a lot more since then. It's just frustrating. I'm not trying to be too negative. I love this sport so much. I love the UFC. I want the UFC to succeed. I want them to be as successful as possible. Trust me, it's good for me. It's good for my living. I love big fights. I just want to see them get that sort of attention. I mentioned this on the beat. When I was an intern at HBO, they let me go into the kind of warehouse on my last day there. This is 2003, and they had every single HBO poster of the last decade, and they said, take as many as you want. I love fight posters. I love fighting. I love boxing. I love MMA. I love all that stuff. So I got a Tito Trinidad one. I got a Shane Mosley one. I got a Lennox Lewis one. And then I went back to school. I went back to Syracuse my senior year, and I put them all over my wall. Yes, this was somewhat of a deterrent as far as the ladies are concerned, but for me personally, waking up every day, looking at these great fight posters, I loved it. You want that 209 poster up in your room? You want that 210 poster? Maybe ironically, you want to show your friends that great promo for the Buffalo card? Come on now. Just a little more TLC. That's all we ask. Anyway, so Gastelum with the big win this past weekend. Shogun with the win over Vellante. Barbosa with a win. Ray Borg with the win. Betch Correia gets the draw, but still does the booty shake anyway. Got to respect that. Speaking of booty shakes, Alex Oliveira with one as well. And then, as I mentioned, Josh Berkman left the gloves in the cage after his loss, but then went to the back and said, I want to at least fight in front of my family in Utah. So he kind of took that one back. No problems there. All right, let's move along to our first guest of the day. As I mentioned, he is returning to action on April the 15th. He is trying to tie history. He's trying to secure his 10th straight title defense. He is fighting Wilson Reis in the UFC's debut in beautiful Kansas City. It's live and free on Fox. We're talking to our good pal, Mighty Mouse, Demetrious Johnson. DJ, how are you?
I'm good, Earl. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us. Are you happy?
Oh, no, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm good. What's up, baby?
Well, you got what you wanted. You wanted to fight in Kansas City, and the UFC listened to you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm very happy that I'm going to be able to headline the Fox card in Kansas City, and looking forward to it.
I bother you all the time. Like, I give you like a week, 2 weeks maybe 3 weeks, and then I say, okay, what's next? When are you returning? And then I consistently bother you. And then around UFC 209, I was like, yeah, what's going on? I haven't heard much about you. And you said you really wanted to fight on that show. You wanted to tie history in front of, I'm not going to say you were, Kansas City's not, right next door to Seattle, but relatively close, I guess you could say, Midwest, West, all that stuff. And it seemed like you were a little worried, like you weren't going to get what you wanted. How did you get it done?
Yeah, obviously, shout out to Earl Wynett for posting, that I wanted to, fight on Kansas City, MMAFighting.com, one of the best mixed martial arts website I even go to.
Wow.
But with that being said, obviously the UFC, they have what they would like to have done, and they gave me multiple dates to fight on. First off, I wanted to fight on May 13th in Dallas just because it was just, another big pay-per-view card. You have the baddest man on the planet fighting, also the heaviest man on the planet fighting. So I figured I would try to go on that route. But, we landed in Kansas City, which I'm very happy about. I love fighting on Fox. The time frame works perfect in my liking. Usually when you fight on a pay-per-view, the main card doesn't start at 7. But if you're on the East Coast or Mid-Coast, that means you don't start fighting until 9 o'clock, and then you don't get done until freaking midnight or 1 a.m. in the morning. So it's not about that life. Yeah.
And also, and I feel like I've talked to you about this before, I love when you fight on Fox, especially Big Fox, because I feel like the whole narrative of, selling pay-per-views and all that is just kind of thrown out the window. You don't have to answer those questions. There's not that kind of pressure on your shoulders. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, and even when I do headline on pay-per-view, I don't worry about the pay-per-view, all that stuff. I just love how Fox, I think they do a good job in the production, and it's on Fox. It's 213 Fox. I mean, The Simpsons are on that channel, for God's sake. The Simpsons have been on there for a long time, so there's always a special heart in my place with Fox. Growing up watching it, Simpsons, Family Guy, and all the other great shows on there.
You said they do a better, and then you corrected yourself. What did you want to say? A better job than who?
I don't want to say they do a better job. I feel like when I fight on Fox, I see the commercials a lot more, and I don't have, my father-in-law and everybody and their mom at the YMCA asking me, hey, when you fight again? Usually when I fight on Fox, everybody and their mama know I'm fighting on Fox.
Okay, fair enough. Were you at all surprised that they went with Wilson?
No, not at all. I mean, like I said, me and him were supposed to run it back, last July, July 30th.
Yeah.
But I got injured. I had an LCL tear, so I wasn't surprised at all. That's what they offered me, and I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. Just like last time when they offered it to me. So yeah, same result. Let's do it.
You mentioned in an interview, I saw it on MMA Junkie, where you said that Dana White told you he doesn't want you to fight Joseph Benavidez again. Is that true?
So that was true, but let me give you guys a little more context.
Please.
Back in the day when they were trying to do the Ultimate Fighter show, when I first found out about the Ultimate Fighter show, Ultimate Fighter Tough 24, found it out by Twitch. Oh, you can follow me on Twitch at Mighty Mouse UFC 125 at Twitch. But I found out there, and then I said, you know what? Why don't you throw everybody in the house? Throw Joseph in the house. Throw everybody in the UFC roster in the house, and then go find the rest of the guys around the world. Throw them all in the house, and the winner will be victorious. And then my pick was that if Joseph got in the house, he'd beat every single one of those guys, and then he would earn his third shot. And then Dana White was like, dude, I love how you stick up for all your colleagues and your buddies, but I don't want to see that again, okay? I don't want to see it. And I was like, I'm just being honest, Dana. I mean, you want the best man in the house, the best fighters on the UFC roster. Throw them in the house, and then have those guys fight the regional champions. So that's where the context came from. That's where I came out and said that. Where when I was like, yeah, if the next person who's going to get the next title shot is going to be the top 24 winner, throw Joseph in the house, throw Tigers in the house when he's at 25, throw Dodson in the house again, throw all those guys in the house. That way, there's nobody bitching or complaining about who deserves the next shot at the 125, and then it was like, no, I got different plans. I was like, oh, whatever. Just, I try to be a very honest person and not try to, blow smoke up anybody's ass. But like when it comes down to it, the UFC says, hey, this is you're going to fight. All right, sounds good, but we'll fight. I have nothing against Joseph Johnson, all the guys I've fought in the past. They're all great competitors, and I wish nothing but the best for their careers.
The theory that I threw out last week was, I wonder if they're saving Joseph for the record-breaking title defense. If you get 11, you break Anderson's record only because we can tie the whole circle together. You won the belt against him. If we're going to give him a third crack, maybe we do it with this, with this storyline. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that can definitely be a possibility, Like I said, UFC has, what they like to do, and then I have what I like to do. But at the same time, if that's, full circle, yeah, that sounds good to me. And like I said, when people ask about that fight, there's not everybody jumping out of their seats to do it. And he's on a 6-fight win streak. He's beat the best of the best division. The only people he's ever lost in his career is me and Dominic Cruz. So yeah, I mean, if he keeps on going around and beat people up on stuff, it's good. I just think, they're probably looking at it at a way that, like, okay, let's say if he beats Demetrious Johnson, perfect. He's a new champion. We can throw some guys in that he hasn't already beat. Okay, if he loses again, okay, what division and let him keep beating up the top contenders? Or do we say, hey, we want you to go to 135? They have to look at all their options. Or I might say that to the very last one, like, hey, maybe at the 11th title defense, I beat him, and they're like, hey, Demetrious, we want you to go to 135. We're going to pay you X, Y, and Z. Now we're going to do a vacate 125-pound championship. Joseph, you can fight whoever the number one contender is at that time. I mean, they can do so many different options.
Have they brought up the 135 thing recently?
No, they have not.
Okay. Just checking, because I know that's been discussed a little bit in the past as far as people outside of your circle, but not necessarily with you. Have you thought about, the circumstances, the opponent, the date, the venue? If you get to number 11, like, I know you don't want to look past Wilson, but have you? I mean, that's a big deal. That's a record. That's one that we thought maybe would never get broken. Have you started to think about that at all?
Sometimes I do, every once in a blue moon, but I try to stay focused on, this fight. The biggest thing I try to stay focused on is staying healthy and training. But yeah, I have my eyes on to see what big pay-per-view stars are coming back in the fall. So I hope I can, help those guys headline a big pay-per-view card.
What's the perfect scenario for you?
Perfect scenario. I would say Conor fighting Floyd Mayweather. That'd be the boxing main event, and then you can have GSP fighting Michael Bisping, and then I can be right behind him as the pre-co-main event. That would be the perfect scenario. And in Las Vegas, at the beautiful T-Mobile Arena, that's what I would love to have.
Would you get pay-per-view points though?
I don't know. I gotta go through the contract, read all that fine print.
Yeah.
I'm just, I got to read all that good stuff. But, hopefully we'll find out.
What about opponent?
I don't care.
You don't care. You just want that record.
Yeah, I just want the record and, just a big spotlight to do it on. I mean, first, we're jumping ahead. We're jumping the gun.
Sure. First,
I got to stay healthy in training camp. Then I got to take on a very tough Wilson Reis. And then once we get that done, I'm going to let my body relax, enjoy, the springtime in Washington State. And then, I'll start getting myself in gear. Whether I lose or win, get ready for the next one. So,
when did the record start to A, become special for you, and more importantly, B, in your mind at least, attainable? Like, when did you start to think, like, this is something that I want, and this is something that I actually think that I can get?
I think after my 5th title defense, it was something that I was like, okay, we're at 5 now, and 5 feels like 4 and 3. So. I guess let's shoot for 10. That's where Anderson has it now, and everybody keeps talking about Anderson as the greatest middleweight of all time. He's held the belt the longest in UFC history. So I was like, hey, I guess that's a goal to shoot for after the 5th title defense. I was like, let's try to shoot for it. And after the 6th and the 7th and the 8th and then the 9th, it was like, all right, we keep on chugging along, and now we're getting to 10, and it's just crazy that, my career has come to this point, because at one time I didn't even care about being a champion. There was not even a chance for me to be a champion because this weight class never existed. Shit, not even 135.
Right. Do you feel like a big enough deal has been made of the fact that you're this close, or would you want to see more attention paid to it?
I think it was a big enough deal. Everybody, I think my boy T Wood said it the best. There's people out there who just want to see bar fights. There's people out there who want to see technical. I think Joe Rogan's a big fan of this, because he came out and said, what's the point of having a championship belt when the champion's not going to fight, guys in that division? A good example, Michael Bisping taking on GSP. he should be fighting Yoel Romero.
Right.
Yoel Romero is beating everybody. He hasn't fought Yoel Romero, and that's the more contender. So for me, I think there are big fans out there who believe that championship fight should be, you want to win as many as you can consecutively. And then when you're at the tail end of your career and you're like, all right, I'm almost done or whatever, and I'm just looking for the big fight, then yeah, you can do that. But for me, I'm still young in my career. I'm a young 30-year-old man, and I'm still trying to tie the record and break it and set a new one.
Do you worry that they're going in the direction of more entertainment over sport?
I think they do a little bit of both. I think there's a little bit of more. There's sport. There's a little entertainment. Obviously, at the end of the day, UFC, WME, and IMG, their business, and they got to make sure they make back that $4.2 billion they sold. They purchased the company for. So I think here and there, I don't have a problem GSP fighting Michael Bisping. I think if GSP came back and fought at, top 5 middleweight and beat that person and then got a title shot, then I think people would be more accepting. But since he's just coming off, 3 years or 4 years, I don't know how long he's been away from the sport, and getting an immediate title shot when there's guys who've been grinding, this whole entire time to get to that point in their career, then it just be taken away from them. I think that's where a lot of the true hard fans like WTF, what the F?
Yeah. I do like, by the way, how you and Tyron have this bond. You mentioned to me that you went to Vegas to support him, and he always supports you. You guys kind of have this like watch thing together, and you're kindred spirits in that regard. He is a much more, I think it's fair to say, a polarizing figure than you are, and he's not afraid to speak his mind. Do you guys speak about this sort of thing behind the scenes? Does he ask for your advice? Oh, how do you kind of stay out of the headlines, or do you not talk to him at all? But I mean, because it has been kind of an interesting 3-4 months for him since he became champion.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, the very first time I met Tyron Woodley, I was a huge fan of him when he came out of the Strike Force. I actually named my son after him. That name was very intriguing to me, and how he carried himself as a champion in Strike Force. And we talk all the time. I bounce ideas off him. He bounces ideas off me, and we give each other advice. He's a huge inspiration to me in my career, just the way he carries himself and how he just says whatever he wants, and I respect that. And you have to respect his opinion and how he feels about things. So yeah, man, huge fan of his. And I always ask him, you sure you want to do that? He goes, yeah, I'm gonna do it. This is how I feel, and that's what I'm gonna say. And I'm like, all right. And there's sometimes I ask him, like, how do you feel that way? And he goes, just because you haven't experienced doesn't mean it's not happening or anything like that. And me and my wife, Destiny, we totally agree where he's coming from on certain points. And, you have to, the biggest one he said that resonated with me was that, he's doing this beautiful thing called the Champ Camp, where he's going around talking to, troubled children. He's giving back to the community. And, he told me that he asked the UFC to push it one time, and the UFC goes, no, I'm not going to do that. But the Mac Live, once Conor dropped that, they pushed the hell out of that. And, it's basically Conor McGregor going around buying Ferraris and driving and talking, doing his thing, showing his watches, showing how many suits he's got. So it's a little bit different parallel. Then you have to look at it like, okay, do we want to, obviously when people look at this, the trolls, the fat guys who can't get girls and all that stuff, can't buy a Ferrari, they're like, I want to be like Conor. So it's kind of, it outweighs it. So as a athlete, you have to sit back and think like, okay, why won't they push mine? Where, like you said, I'm an analyst, I'm a husband, I'm a father. I don't do drugs. I, never disrespecting anybody on a big level. So why won't they promote me and they would promote this guy? So you have to think about that. Do you think that it's because I'm black, or is it because he's white? I mean, that's where he's coming from. And I totally understand it, because as an athlete, as an African American, you have to sit back and think about that. It was like, you know what? And I have people who work at Microsoft that are, they're like, you have to think like that, because why is that person going to push over you? And it's a side of, that we look in, and as being African American, you have to, if I were to say that's never came through my mind, then I would be lying to the world.
So do you feel like racism is an issue in MMA?
I don't want to say it's an issue. I don't want to say it's an issue, because obviously I've been promoted very well as a flyweight champion, but can I say that people might feel there is? Yeah, there probably people feel this, but I don't think they might ever like, I'm not going to promote that man because he's black. So
right.
get something else in front of me. Yeah, I don't think they don't like doing that. But I'm just saying that if people feel that way, then it's not. It's a possibility that some people feel that way. That's just how it is.
Do you ever feel that from the fans?
No. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've been in Ubers and I've been taxi driver. They're looking at me. He goes, "Hey, you're that flyweight champion, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am. That's me." He goes, "You know why you're not famous, right?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "Because you're black." And I'm like,
No.
"Good for you. You got big balls, my friend."
Really? I don't feel. I mean, that's a crazy statement.
No, that's a crazy statement. He said, like I said, this is something I experienced.
Yeah.
In my life, you know, like I said, a lot of people don't talk about the things they have experienced in their life, but that's just one thing that I've experienced. Like as you try to get out of Tyron Woodley. Tyron, last time you did an interview with me, you were like, "Can you elaborate more on the things that you said you've been around that make you feel that way?" He never explained anything, but that's one thing that I've said in the back. And then as an athlete, you get out of the car and you're like, "What the fuck's he talking about?" Or then you sit back and you're like, "Huh? Do you think he's right? Do you think he's wrong?" It's a mind thing, your brain starts to think about stuff like that. So that's all it is, man. That's where I think everybody just misunderstands Tyron when he talks about that. But I understand where he's coming from.
Sometimes you wish that you had that gene in you, where you were as outspoken as Tyron. Like you're like, man, I wish I had that. Do you envy that in a regard, or do you like staying out of the spotlight?
I envy it sometimes, but I let myself go more on Twitch when I'm streaming because it's, I'm talking to people, and then they, last night some troll, I try not to give the trolls a chance to, get me riled up, but every once in a while.
Did we lose him?
He goes, "Oh, you're not a draw." Are you still there?
Yeah, we got you back.
Okay. Yeah. So this guy, he goes, "You're not a draw. You're not a draw. Enjoy Fox." And I was like, "Well, my friend, guess what? You enjoy going to your fucking job on Monday from 9 to 5 and enjoy punching that punch clock." And then I said, "Okay, all right. You say I'm not a draw. Let's go back in time and look at all the UFC pay-per-view number draws, okay?" And so I did all the research and I pulled up all on my stream. I was like, "Okay, let's take a look at John Jones versus Alex Gustafsson." And my argument was that draws are more about drama. People want to see drama. Okay, so I went back to John Jones fighting Alex Gustafsson. What UFC was that, Ariel?
165.
165. 165 did about 310,000 pay-per-view buys. Okay, now that was back in 2014. I don't know. I can't remember. And then I fast forward to Jose Aldo and Renan Barão and Ricardo Lamas versus Uriah Faber. And Uriah Faber is a big polarizing figure in the sport of mixed martial arts. He's been a pioneer the whole entire out his whole entire career for the the smaller weight division. And then I pulled up the numbers and it was like maybe 275. Okay, you had two champions there. No beef between none of those guys, just great, amazing athletes. Okay, but nobody really cared about that. You fast forward a little bit, you go to John Jones fighting somebody else. It was like maybe 320, 355. Now you fast forward to, at the time, pound for pound best fighter in the world, me, and then pound for pound best fighter in the world, two, John Jones, taking on gold medalist Henry Cejudo, and you had OSP fighting 375 buy rates. Then you jump to some drama to where there's bad blood. No, they don't like each other. He was going to spit in his face. He was going to go next door and kill him. 875,000 buys between John Jones and Daniel Cormier. Now, this is all speculation, all the numbers I found online doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And then, I went to Conor, and he had amazing numbers. And then you went to, Ronda Rousey. So then I even went to GSP, and then he was in the 400,000 range. So I'm like, so what is considered a draw? Is 310,000 considered a draw? Or is 875 or 1.5 million considered a draw? So I told this guy, and I was like, so you're telling that there's only, he was right, but I was telling him, like, dude, like, sometimes being an athlete, it's not about being the biggest draw. It's about being the best fighter in the world and worrying about that. And so I told that guy he was a dumbass, and just because a person, you can have a title pay-per-view with 8 champions on it, and 8 people are fighting somebody that nobody cares about. People are either going to tune in or not. But if you get somebody, I guarantee you, if you have a girl, Catch Me Outside, the girl in Dr. Phil, don't know if you know, she's very famous, 4.5 million followers on Instagram. I guarantee you, if you give her some gloves, and put her in the octagon, she'd be the highest selling pay-per-view fighter in the world. She'd probably do way more numbers than Ronda, just because she brings drama and negativity to wherever she goes. That's why I was telling the guy that. I was like, you're a dumbass and you're a troll. And then we roasted him, and we sent him on his way with the band.
Oh, wow. That is intense. No, and I appreciate the insight, and I appreciate you doing that research. You're 100% right. Unfortunately, in combat sports, it's the one sport where being a draw is actually even brought up. Like, you think about a guy like Tim Duncan, very vanilla personality, never did interviews, never wanted to talk, never got into any controversy, but won, I think it was like five championships. There's now a guy named Kawhi Leonard on the Spurs. Same way. Doesn't say a word. Doesn't talk to anyone. But he's one of the best players in the world. Unfortunately, in combat sports, being a draw is really the only kind of sport where, boxing, MMA, where this ever comes up. It doesn't. No other athlete has to talk about this sort of thing. And I feel for you, but I think you have come a long way in that regard. By the way, one last thing. Ray Borg wins on Saturday, and then he mentioned, you and Wilson saying, I'm coming for the belt. Were you impressed? Is he on your radar at all?
I didn't watch the fight. I was out having German chocolate cake for my father's my best friend's father's birthday. So I didn't watch the fight, but I heard he won the fight. Congrats to him. And no, man, you can't worry about what other guys are saying and who's coming up. There's always going to be another guy coming up. I've been in this sport for way too long. Been a champion, fighting the best of the division for so long, fighting the best of the division, double, back-to-back.
Yeah.
And I don't worry about that. I just worry about myself, staying healthy and staying focused. I know these guys are gunning for me. It's like high school. Everybody's trying to kick my ass. And you just got to, stay humble, keep on training. And before you try to get me off the air, Arawani, you have not subscribed to the channel. What's taking so long?
Gosh, I don't even know how do I subscribe to Twitch? And I hope they're paying you for all this love, because it's this and the nuts and more. You're all over those guys, and it looks great, by the way. The birthday cake one that you tweeted about last week looks phenomenal. But I don't know, where do I go to Twitch? Do I need an Xbox? Do I need a PlayStation?
You can use your phone. Don't worry. We're going to take care of you. I'm going to have one of my moderators write something up. I'm going to send it to you via DM on Twitter, and we're going to take care of you. We'll get you in there and get you a nice little white belt around your waist.
All right. We were supposed to do like a weigh-in show together, and then you left me hanging.
That thing was kind of, it was a great production, but at the same time, I don't really like talk about fighting, because you sit there and you argue with other people about their opinions. Like, I don't like to put a lot of energy into things, where people are like, oh, well, I thought he won. Well, I thought he won. Why did you think he won? Oh, because I thought he did this. Oh, well, I thought different. I thought I weighed this more than that. I was like, I'm not over it. And I thought it wasn't a good show.
All right. Fair enough. But I'm happy to come on
honest. Anytime
you want me. And yes, if I can figure it out, I'd be happy to watch you play video games. I can think of nothing more exciting.
More than that. Way more than that.
DJ, a pleasure as always. Looking forward to April 15th. Big time stuff. You're tying the record. You're looking to tie the record. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. April 15th on Fox, Kansas City against Wilson Reis. It's great. I'm happy they listened to you. I'm happy you got it done. Happy you got what you wanted. Looking forward to it, and always happy to have you on the show. Best of luck.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it, man.